it 9 o'clock? Yes, it is. Right, everybody. Welcome to Economic Growth Committee of the 9th of April. We'll look to make a start. If everyone can take their seats. Councillor Meehan. I'd like to hand over to Councillor Fitzgerald. Hold on. It's me.
Tēnā koe te whaia, te tiamana o te kaunihira I tēnei rā. Koutou ko eke mai nei kino ki te whare matua o te kaunihira me karakia tātou. Tūtawa mai runga, tūtawa mai raro, tūtawa mai roto, tūtawa mai waho. Kia tau wai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tāhie.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Welcome everybody to Economic Growth Committee this morning. I'd like to welcome everybody here. Very big agenda today. I just want to first off explain that the meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the YouTube channel. The health and safety requirements for the meeting, because we will have quite a few people in the chamber today, I just think you should remember where the fire exits are. So we've got one out that door, and that door. And we will follow Nikos. He will take us out calmly out of the building, and Hannah, so we'll just make sure we follow them if we do have a fire. There's no smoking or vaping, and it's prohibited, and a defibrillator is located outside the entrance downstairs by the customer services on the ground floor. Any near misses or incidents will be reported through the council administrator. First off, I'd like to record any apologies, but I think we've got a full house, so there's no apologies today, and so nothing to move there. And notification of any additional items. I don't think we've got any additional items today. Don't think we need any today on this agenda. And declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything to declare this morning? No? Okay. Public comment. So we have got 2 public comments this morning. We are going to stick to just them doing a comment, and I won't be taking any questions from the floor on either public comment. So they've both been informed of this, so they'll just be giving their public comment this morning. And I'm going to be a stickler for time, so it is a 3-minute public comment from both of them, and they have been informed of that. So first of all, welcome up Brian, who'll come up to the floor. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm back. I'm just going to do a few thank yous really, because this is probably my last meeting I want to attend. I just want to thank those who supported the businesses in Featherston Street, because not many of you did, and we are here, we are a business, we need support. So thanks for those who voted against this ridiculous street changes and supported us. Thanks to the Ratepayers Association. That's something new, we never had them before. And I want to thank them for their support, because they will be the ones that will remind us when we vote this year that those of you who voted for the street will be voted out. So I suggest you tidy up your CVs. There's probably a few people, councillors, who I've heard speak on the way through. I think I might just highlight again. I don't mean to be personal, and I might throw your name in there, but it's about the bigger picture. The members like Orphy and Lorna, who went on about safety, and all they wanted to do was vote because it was safe. Yet you guys never read the safety audit. No one read the safety audit. No one knew if what you were voting on was safe. And now the emergency services have stepped in and said it's not safe. You were fed data on incidents on the whole street, yet you only fixed 900 metres, not 5k. So you made changes based on data that wasn't correct. You spent millions of dollars on 15% of the road to save the safety. I want to thank the likes of Rachel. Every time we spoke, she went on about this wasn't really a representative group here. Now, what is a representative group? If you're prepared to come here and speak, we represent lots of people. So don't ever play us down saying 1,000 people's not worth it, because 1,000 people who don't vote for you will change the swing. Karen, you jumped ship because you told us you didn't realise that the bus stops are on the road when you voted. They were in the plan originally, so I don't know why you didn't see those. We did. Grant, you made a comment that the schools are on board and we should proceed. The schools weren't on board, and they made it clearly from day one. You ignored them. We had to wait for the principal to speak here one day to see that they weren't on board. I even arranged a meeting with the principal and Grant, and he told him in front of me what the story was. Still, nothing got changed. So the schools aren't on board, contrary to your comments, Grant. Don't know who told you that. I want to thank the councillors who haven't even asked a question. They've sat here at meeting after meeting, and they know the answers. Didn't even ask a question. This is all on video, guys, so it's nothing I've made up. The council who abstained, so couldn't even make a decision on what to vote on. Now, we voted you in to make a decision, and I voted for you, Katie. I'm disappointed you abstained. If you've changed your mind, change your mind and stand up and be counted. So I just can't believe what goes on in this room. I'm never going to join you, that's one thing I've learnt. Finally, Michael Bridge. He came and saw me 3 years ago. 2.5, and told me there's going to be some changes to the street in the early days.
Excuse me, you can't actually talk about a staff member like that.
Well,
Sorry.
I can say I was told by a member of the staff, I won't name, okay, that there will be a cycleway here whether you like it or not. So that was before consultation even started. So from day one, we're on the back foot with a comment, you'll get a cycleway whether you like it or not. I don't know if consultation was even valid because the decision was made before we started. And finally, I just want to say, what do you think those people at Zilch are thinking? Those poor buggers got no food. They come along and queue up. They see you've spent $4 or $5 million on a road that doesn't work.
Really appreciate it. You're actually over time.
Okay, thank you. Look,
Thank you.
This is my last time, guys.
Thank you.
Get it right.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Right, the next comment we've got today is from Chris T.O. 3 minutes, Chris, and you'll see the timer up beside you. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Look, I didn't know I was going to speak today, but thanks very much for the opportunity to do so. I'm not going to throw threats at you. I'm not going to throw your apparent words back at you. I'm just going to say, what sort of city do we want? You know, is it a city that's just completely dominated by what it's been dominated for the last 50 years and the move to automobile? Everybody has to get around by the car. I've had probably a 50-year association with this city, and in that time, aspects of it have really improved, and you and your predecessors have been involved in those improvements, and some aspects have actually had detrimental effects. And one of those is that you can't get around this city effectively now without going in a car, okay, because it's just too dangerous and too frightening out there. Those of you who know me will know that I've been a keen advocate for cycling and walking, and I've been a cyclist and walker, well, a walker for slightly longer, but a cyclist since I was about 4, okay? I cycled to my primary school from a rural setting, so it was probably about 3 kilometres from the time I went to school, okay? So I've been a cyclist a long time, and I now really pick my time when I go out onto the streets of Palmerston North, because there is, at times, just so much traffic. Okay, from about 8 o'clock until about 9, and from about 2:30 when the people start turning up to schools until 5 and 6. It's just so busy. I just don't go out. And I know lots and lots of people who say they don't go out at all on a bike anymore. They take the car. And I think that's just not giving me and others the opportunity that we should have to move around this city, to do our business, to see our friends in the way we choose. And Featherston Street is really the first really good example of that opportunity being provided in that section for which it's done, and hopefully more in due course. It really hasn't had, in my view, a negative effect on anybody. The data that I've seen says that the businesses have probably had a downturn in business, but so has the whole city and so has the whole country. And actually their businesses look, according to the data, to be doing slightly better. Or maybe they should be made to share the benefit they've actually got from this changes to this road. I think that's my time, but thank you very much, and please stay the course. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Right, I'd like to move that the committee receive the public comment for information, seconded by Councillor Wood. If we can now vote on that, please. That's passed, 16 votes for and none against. Thank you. We can move to item number 7, item number 6, which is the minutes. I'd like to move the minutes, seconded by Councillor Wood. Have anybody got anything they'd like to raise in the minutes? No? We'll look to vote on the minutes, please. It has passed with 15 votes for and 1 abstention. Thank you. We now move to the juicy item of the day, which is item number 7. If we could have Glenn and Michael move up to the seat, please. And Susan, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. Good morning, councillors. The paper in front of us today is the second monitoring report on the Featherston Street Safety Improvement Project that was completed in July last year. To recap, the objectives of the project were to detune Featherston Street, to make Featherston Street safer, and to build dedicated facilities for buses and bike riders. The data shows that over the first 6 months of operations, Featherston Street is performing as intended. It has had fewer crashes, albeit over a very short time period to measure. The volume of cars and trucks has reduced on Featherston Street. Speeds on Featherston Street are slower. The number of bus passengers, bike riders and pedestrians is up. Hundreds of school students cycle, walk or cross this road every day. Featherston Street is no less efficient for vehicle travel than before these changes. The data indicates that it takes motorists no more time to get through the Rangatiki intersection compared with pre-construction. Albeit, if you are behind a bus that stops during peak hours, multiple times as you transit through Featherston Street, your journey may be slower. And there are conflicting views. St John's, for example, reports slower time to transit through Featherston Street across the city or to respond to an incident on Featherston Street. Businesses along this stretch of Featherston Street are performing as well or better than the rest of Palmerston North. Public sentiment is mixed, though many people recognise Featherston Street is now safer for pedestrians and bike riders. While council has made changes to the Featherston Street area, the intersection with Rangatiki Street is key to how this road performs. NZTA, in conjunction with officers, have made some improvements to the intersection signals last year, and we are working together on minor changes which will continue to increase the flow of traffic even further. Happy to take questions on this report.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Glenn. Couple of questions from me. Can you just explain to us how and to what extent the emergency services were consulted prior to the redesign of the street, and what feedback you got from them on the plan before it was put into physical work?
Right side.
Kia ora, I'm Michael Bridge, Service Manager for Active Transport. So the engagement that we've had with emergency services has been open through the process. So prior to or during the development of the designs, we reached out and engaged with each of the services to provide input to the designs. Post-construction, as reported in November last year, we had feedback from police and fire and emergency services, and that followed a site meeting with fire and emergency services on site to address their issues. And then earlier this year, we met again with fire and emergency services and St John to solicit their, specifically St John's feedback, which I think there was a question at the November meeting specifically about St John's. And the feedback, the questions, we didn't ask them specific questions about each element. We just invited open feedback about how they are finding these changes on Featherston Street, and specifically around the intersection with Rangatike Street, to understand if and how the changes are affecting them. And then they provided some fire and emergency services, and St John's provided their feedback directly, and then we talked with those two services to each of their points. But then we've just accepted their letters and published them as part of the report.
So just to be clear, they were involved at the consultation phase specifically and invited to comment on design at that point.
That's correct, and we were particularly keen to invite their input to about the concrete separators in respect of, and for example, ensuring that the fire trucks could straddle the separators.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question really is, given the report back and the data that we have, are there any further improvements that you think we could make that would enhance that part of Featherston Street?
Certainly, Councillor, there's ongoing incremental improvements. The likes of the phasing of the traffic lights is one that can have benefit. As with generally with traffic lights, there's probably some more education we can do about people entering signalised intersections, to making sure that they approach the intersection correctly, so they trigger the signal loops, so that people are following the correct distance as they go through any set of traffic lights, so that our automatic systems don't pick up a gap between cars, and so there's definitely an educational piece there as well.
Okay, thank you. I see there are a lot of people in the queue, Madam Chair, so I'll just limit myself to 2 questions.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Johnson, taking off some of my questions. I think just for clarity, you said that regarding the intersection with Rangatike, you're working with NZTA on some minor changes. Are those the changes that you just mentioned in response to Councillor Johnson, or are there other things that you're working with NZTA on there?
They are the changes we're working with the NZTA on, refining the traffic signals. And I should note it is NZTA's intersection. It is an intersection on the state highway. The state highway is a fairly dominant road through there, and we continue to work really well actually with NZTA. They're very receptive to working with us, trialling, tinkering.
So can you say more about what outcomes you're seeking through that approach with NZTA in that intersection?
Yeah, certainly. It's about the turn arrows, if the turn arrows are set appropriately, so can we have traffic flowing through while we can have traffic turning also, about the individual phasings at different times of the day, about the system being set correctly so the intelligence can click on and decide if one leg of the intersection, one part of the intersection is busier than the other. Is the system working as it is? And that's refining, and also understanding if there's anything unique about the traffic flows through there. For example, we've put some cross-hatching in various places. We're working to understand, is that exclusion zone where people aren't parking, does that mean gaps in traffic, which means the intersection's working slightly different than it should? So, and those things take a bit of time to work through.
Great. And just finally, on that relationship with NZTA Waka Kotahi and their wider Streets for People programme, obviously Palmerston North isn't the only place that's gone through this kind of reset. Is there any feedback from other examples that has come to us through NZTA that would suggest whether our programme is out of step with anywhere else, or we do not know that?
It's very hard to comment on other cities or districts' programs, so no, I won't comment on that.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions from me. Firstly, you'll be aware of the 5 additional recommendations that have been circulated in terms of some suggested way forward. Those 3 of those would require quite some capital investment, specifically changing the intersection to Rangatake Street to have the left-hand turning lane. Also, the second one, repositioning the 4 in-lane bus stops. And the 4th one, creating a vehicle drop-off zone across from Boys High. I'm just wondering if there is any estimate of cost that officers would be aware that those 3 recommendations might cost to implement those.
Thank you, Councillor. We've spent a bit of time at this table talking about the 4 bus stops, and I believe the figure that we were using was around about $1 million to make those 4 bus stops in-lane bus stops. The parking bay, if that's what I label it, in the green space, we haven't got any worked up estimates on that one, but that will be a substantial amount of money because it is a fairly major job. To be fair, it's hard to price something like that at this table now without knowing the details really of what council's after, so we would seek some clarity on that. The intersection changes are pretty substantial changes, and again, we need to understand fully what was being proposed, what the risks are, what the opportunities are. A few things that we have been kicking around since this emerged a day or so ago was if we're putting, for example, cyclists on a footpath, we need to get some legality around that and make it a shared path so that cyclists can actually go on a shared path. There is some standards around a shared path width, which our footpath currently doesn't meet. So there's quite a bit of work that we need to do to build up a estimate, but it's a substantial amount of money.
So just to interrupt there, Cam wants to, sorry.
Yeah, so I just want to add to that as well so that you have the full picture. So in addition to the costs that you incur in terms of the additional capital costs, of course, you've already incurred capital expenditure to create the assets such as the stops as they are. When you pull out, what will end up having to occur is you would end up expensing or writing off that asset through the P&L as well. So you'll have that one-off adjustment because, of course, when you capitalise these, they're intended to be depreciated over the life of their theoretical life. So just so you're aware of that, it's not a cash transaction, that one, but you would see that come through as well if you proceeded in that manner.
Thank you, that's useful to understand. Can I just get a bit more clarity around that? So when you say you're expensing the asset, does that have an impact on the operational costs then?
What it is it's it basically says what is the remaining value of the asset, because they're relatively new. There'll be quite a high remaining value, and it creates a, you'd probably call it a non-operating expense through the income statement or profit and loss statement, and that would be a one-off transaction that we would have to explain, but it doesn't have a cash implication as such. It's just to be aware that for that particular period of time, for that financial year, that if you chose to do that, you would see a deficit in that year as a result of the write-off of the existing asset.
Thank you. And just further to those potential solutions that will be placed on the table for consideration, aside from the cost, do you have any other perspective that would be valuable for us to understand if we're considering those options?
We have plenty. Some of the headline issues that we need to work through, and they can be worked through, is, for example, if we are putting cyclists onto a footpath, and I'll pick Zilch. For example, McDonald's are both incredibly busy footpath areas, and if we're putting cyclists on there, just managing through how we work that conflict between the cyclists and people on narrow footpaths. We'd want to work through, if you carry on around the corner into Rangituki Street, turn left on a cycle, for example, past Zilch. As you go around the corner from memory, there's a takeaway, there's hairdressers there. I think signal boxes are on the footpath. There's other street lights there. There's very narrow footpath because there's at least 2 of the traffic light poles on the footpath. So those are the realities that we need to work through from a safety and design point of view of how we accommodate that safely. So that's an example. Okay,
thank you. And just my final question relates to 3.4A, 3.4A on page 21, where it talks about the median travel times for the westbound and eastbound traffic as compared to previous counts, being 17 seconds median and 13 seconds. I'm just interested to understand what the range is of those wait times as compared to previously, like as in, I assume if that's the median, there'll be some longer waits and some shorter waits. What's the range?
We'd need to come back with the range.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, but I think where you're heading, there will be times where, as with any medium or average, there will be some that are shorter, some that are quicker. And as I alluded to or spoke about earlier, if you're driving at 20 minutes ago at 9:10 through the area, and you're behind a bus that has lots of students on at 9:10, it will take you longer than it will in another hour's time when the traffic is cleared and that. So it will have a range, but we will provide you that information.
Do you have an understanding of what the longest kind of waits are for travellers?
I might just put a caveat on that. This data has come from Waka Kotahi, and so we have passed on all the information that they have given us. We don't have any more data. Okay. We can ask them for more information, but there's no guarantee that we'd be able to come back with any more information.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Thanks, Councillor. Just one question from me on the shared pathways. We've got examples of shared pathways in the city with the river pathways. They're shared with cyclists, pedestrians and scooters. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And we don't have any accidents on those pathways?
We have accidents on all pathways. Probably the difference between sections of the river pathway is if you think of it as a 2.5 or 3 metre wide path, people going unidirection, so you're either heading up or down the pathway, if that's the term I use, as opposed to the intersection I talked about before, Zilch, round to the hairdressers, where it's 1.5 metres, 1.4 metres wide. People stepping out of shops or hairdressers.
So what was the number of accidents we've had on those pathways?
Currently people don't, on the pathway, no, I don't have that information. We could look and see if we got that
Okay,
information.
thank you. Okay, councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to the baseline data, when we're working out the last couple of monitoring that we've got increased usage, in 3.6, I'm referencing back to the Featherston Street Cycleway Update Report to Council, which was on 28th of June. Well, did that capture the baseline data in the months of May, June? Can I understand when we took the original baseline, what we're measuring the growth of, what seasons we were in?
So it was a different methodology that we took. We took data, so we did pedestrian and cycle numbers during the design phase. So June last year, we were already kind of close to completing construction. And then we also had, we did a trial, took data from the August 2023 trials, which we reported in September 2023. So that is basically a lot of the baseline data, but completely different methodology from the data that we provided in November last year and the data today. So it similar snapshots, but different methodology. So not easy to compare like for like.
In what way was it so different?
So we took.
And why have we not continued with the monitoring in the same sort of way we started with baseline data, so we can get a true comparison?
Yeah, for me to the one. Yeah. So the data that we captured for the report in November last year and today follow the direction from Council in June to come back with more detailed information about the effects of the changes that we're making. And we decided that we needed to provide some more comprehensive data. So we captured data over longer periods of time at peak time. So we've captured more data over more time for November. So more information.
Okay. With the 4 cameras that we've continued to monitor in, and this was asked last time this was reported, it could be true that there could be a cyclist that could bike up the street and actually be counted 4 times. Is that that's still true to this monitoring, isn't it?
So the cameras are in the same places as they were for the November report, and yes, we have monitors in the roadway capturing the vehicles. So if you're a motorist and you're travelling through, you'd be captured twice, one side of the intersection and the other side of the intersection, and we have, like you point out, a pair of cameras on each side of the street. So a pedestrian or a bike rider could be captured twice, but the data shows that also there is a discrepancy between the numbers captured by each of the cameras. So there is a drop-off or a pick-up depending on which camera you're looking at.
But even though it could be counted with the 2 cameras, it could actually be counted with all 4 cameras. Could that be true?
That's true.
Okay, thank you. With the removal of the bus stop, I just went back to the June report from last year because this is some extra recommendations coming up. But in that report, it was there was a paper table the very day of that meeting that had increased figures well in excess of what was in that original report. That was went up to 1 million for one of the options and even up to 1.6 for the option C with the side curb channel. That's one thing around those quotes. Are you still saying that it would cost up to 1.6 million to move the bus stops closer to the curb?
We would need to be clear on what the design was that Council was advocating, and then we'd get some high-level estimates. The true cost we couldn't be certain on until we got a tender that we opened and conformed to what we're after, Councillor.
Thank you. In regards to the total cost of this project, it's known that Council resealed the carriageway because the previous contractor with the sandblasting to do the relines marking, it broke the surface of the carriageway right through that bit. Was the cost of resealing that stretch of road ever recovered from Waka Kotahi towards a contribution to redeem that?
I'll need to come back and confirm that with you, councillor. I don't have that off my head.
Has that reseal amount been included in the total cost for that whole overall project in the end?
If it was resealed under our normal works program, our normal resealing program, it wouldn't have been included in this price, councillor.
Okay, thank you. And just lastly, I just wanted to get clarification on the safety improvements that are within 3.20, design and operational issues. It's mentioned that the park, there's a continuation of parking cars in the cycle lane and gap separators near intersections, and the safety improvements saying it still doesn't need budgeting. Can I get an understanding of how much that would estimate to be redeemed? And then secondly, under the 3, directly under it, it's mentioning there's some additional artwork from Rangatane to be added to the cycleway. Can I understand, this says again no budget for that improvement. Can I understand the value of those two lines for consideration, please?
I can provide an answer to the first question. So we have a high-level estimate for the addition of somewhere between 16 and 20 additional separators to fill those gaps, and that would be in the region of $40,000. In terms of, but that would be subject to some kind of finer detailed design work, and maybe less, maybe more. In terms of the artwork design, we are still working through that. We'd need to come back with a price on what that would involve, but because there's still a bit of design work to do before we actually get a cost for the application.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just want to ask a question. I know I'm trying to let everybody have questions, but there was a lot of questions there. If we can try and bring it back to, like Councillor Johnson did, 3 questions, so just try and bring him back to 3. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'm not going to be too long. First of all, I just want to talk about the potential recommendation, which is around reinstatement of the left-hand turns from Featherston Street into Rangatiki Street, and the suggestion that we're actually going to take the cyclists off the cycleway onto the footpath as a shared path, then navigate the intersection, and then get back onto a cycleway. In terms of that, what's your thoughts around that undermining the whole purpose of the project in the first place?
The key safety improvement in this program was the intersection, because that's where the conflicts are, that's where the higher risk are. Altering that loses the benefits to some extent. The other bit is the efficiency. Cyclists, when they trigger a phase in the crossing and the street lights, have a shorter period of time than the pedestrians triggering a phase on the traffic lights. So if we put our cyclists, the conflicts aside, but if we put the cyclists on the footpath and a cyclist triggers the crossing, it will slow the intersection down further than it would if they were triggering it from a cycle lane, because in short it takes less time for a cyclist to get across an intersection than it does for the least mobile person that the crossing will be set for. So certainly this will undermine the intent of the project, as I understand the intent.
Yep, thank you. And notwithstanding the potential cost of reinstating or taking out parts of the cycleway and reinstating the left-hand turns, in terms of that particular change in the management of that intersection, how would that affect the wider network?
Yeah, good question. And for me, the key word is network. More and more our transport, our roads, our carriageways are a network, and they're interlinked, they're intertwined. If we do make a change, and if it does remove a barrier, if it removes a constriction and frees up free-flowing traffic, very soon our network will self-balance, where more of us will start using that, because things like our Google Maps will refresh and tell us that that's now the quickest way to go. You'll recall that in the introduction I spoke about how traffic numbers have dropped for this section of the road. It is likely if we get time savings by making changes that more traffic will use that road, and in time the road speeds, the volumes will slow down again. So the network will self-balance.
Thank you, Glenn. And my final question really is just around the safety data. We've had 3 accidents in the last 7-month period compared to 92 reported crashes in the 5-year period prior to that. By my calculation, that's about at least a 60% reduction in road trauma. Was that information actually talked about to the 3 emergency services prior to them actually submitting a letter to us about their views on the changes?
We didn't prompt the emergency services with that information. We didn't provide that information to emergency services. I believe the commentary from the police, though, is that they recognise the safety benefits and see that those trade-offs are there. But that point wasn't made by FENS or St John, and we didn't ask that question.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you.
Good. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was questioned on Monday, why is there 2 bus stops, 2 bus shelters sitting outside Woolworths in Featherston Street? Could you explain that to me? I'm not on this committee, so I might have missed part of it.
So the new bus stop with the new shelter is the gazetted bus stop. The old shelter, it was from the previous location of the previous bus stop, and it's just there until such time as we remove it.
Okay. The next question is along the same line. Could the old bus shelter not just be moved, and how much would have that saved us?
Councillor said he was going to move it. Yeah.
If I understand the question, yes, the old bus stop could have still been used. Officers were giving effect to the council decision to put in the new bus stops.
Okay. And my third question is, you mentioned there's been fewer accidents in this than there was previously, and Councillor Hancock touched on it. But in the same period of time that you've measured it, and let's say the previous year, how many fewer accidents were there in the same timing?
Councillor, I do want to caution extrapolating too much out of such a short time series. The changes have only been in effect for not even a year, but I think the answer or the question we heard before was about 60% less, but again on a very short time series.
On the same period of time the previous year?
The same months.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, people, for the report. Just 3 questions and a couple of very quick ones. Because we heard a bit of stuff in public comment, was safety the #1 outcome of this program? And was the funding of this program 90% funded by the Transport Agency?
So the title of the project was the Featherston Street Safety Improvements. So it was the #1 aim of the project, but not the only aim. And it was safety by improving opportunities for active modes and to quote my colleague, detuning Featherston Street. The vast majority of the project was 90% funded by Waka Kotahi through the Streets for People program. A percentage, a small amount of money for the bus stops was 100% funded by Waka Kotahi through Transport Choices.
Okay. Number 2, you spoke about the traffic lights at some length there, Glenn, and maybe prior to you. NZTA didn't engage straight away, did they, with the lights? So we had a bit of a period there where lights were not working properly. they weren't all in sync, but are we now in sync?
Certainly, we are in sync a lot more than we were 12 months ago. And now we're working very well with the NZTA.
And like some of the commentary in the report, it talks about, phases of lights, turning lights still on when they should be off or potentially off. Are those the sort of things that you're talking to the agency about?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And third, just about shared pathways, because there seems to be a little bit of comment about that and perhaps a lack of understanding. Are they in other cities? Shared pathways in real busy intersections?
Shared pathways are in a number of cities and in a whole range of environments. The busier the environment, the wider and more by definition a shared pathway needs to be a shared pathway, not a footpath.
So, just following on that, so the Fitzherbert Bridge that's a shared pathway, right? Fitzherbert Bridge?
That's your last question, Mr Mayor.
Well, yes, it is. And it's narrower than the carriage pathway or the footpath of Featherston Street. It's just a yes or no, it'll be fine.
Slightly different example because it's a separated path with no other users, so just walkers and cyclists. So there's no shoppers coming in and out, no people residential.
True, and there's none on the areas of a potential left turning bay that shops have.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is a shared path advisable in this location?
That's a tough question, Councillor. That's one that we've been debating since this resolution emerged 24 hours ago. We would have to have some discussions with the safety auditors, and that'll be centred around the amount of conflicts that are on the corners, the width, the furniture, the fittings, and I've just seen my colleagues writing me a note here, so so that's something that we just need to work through.
Thanks, and will that be definitively worked through before the budget's set?
We will get a clear understanding today, hopefully, of what the council table is requesting, and then we'll go away and work through the issues, and we'll have a high-level report or information back to the table.
So what would we actually see? We're only a couple weeks away from actually setting that budget, a few weeks away. What would we actually get back?
What I'd hope we'd provide back to you would be our commentary on the question you asked: is a shared path advisable in that location? So we'd come back with a high level answer. We wouldn't have an opportunity to realistically do the detailed design. What we've been kicking around, for example, is if we put in a left turn lane, what does that look like? If the goal is to increase efficiency through the traffic lights of vehicles, the left turn lane needs to be long enough to have stacking of cars to make a material difference for the intersection. And by that, I mean we'd need to be clear how long that lane needs to be. If a car takes up 6 metres, for argument's sake, an 18 metre, 20 metre left turning lane would only hold 3 cars. Will that make a material difference to the flow of the intersection? Possibly not. Would a 60 metre design parameter for a left turn lane be more appropriate? The model would do that, and that could impact on the flows of the intersection. Obviously, the longer the left turn lane, the greater the conflict points, and you think if I cross across the other side, I want to say McDonald's office depot there, down there, some fairly big conflicts there. And if that's a shared path down that far, that might be different than just a short shared path with different conflicts.
Great, thanks. And just to clarify, regardless of kind of whether there is or isn't a new turn lane brought into this picture, kind of overall traffic flow you expect would just balance out across the network rather than actually markedly change what happens at this intersection.
Yes, users will adapt to the fast wave going through and will take spare capacity on any of our networks. We see.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. That was your fourth question. Councillor Zabellan. Sorry, I'm being fair as I possibly can. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've distilled my list to just 3 questions. The first one is regarding shared paths. Is there a designation process involved in that?
The short answer is yes, there is.
Okay, thank you. We have a shared crossing situation at Pioneer Highway that we've just put in. And I understand that this is the sort of treatment that you have at roundabouts in the Hawke's Bay, for example, where cyclists are in a cycle lane and then they come off-road into the shared path environment for busy intersections and then they come back onto the cycleway. So is that something that we have in the city, or would this look potentially something like
a detailed or even a sketch design of that hasn't been developed. The only design that we have of shared path space in that area, I think it was brought to council in June 23, I believe, where the question was first raised about what it would look like to have a shared path in front of McDonald's, and so that was the only work that we did on a design at that point. It would be different from the roundabout designs that you're referring to in Hawke's Bay.
and Pioneer?
Well, Pioneer is a signalised crossing, specifically for those 2 modes. So, it's not an intersection, it's just a crossing.
Okay, thank you. Finally, just in regards to the green space berm outside Mitre 10, and there's a recommendation that could be created to a school drop-off zone. Just in the comments that I'd made earlier when we discussed this, whether or not creating a cycle lane on that aspect and then reinstating the parking, would that be a cheaper option than creating an additional roadway with that berm, cycleway on the berm versus roadway on the berm?
There's a fair bit in that question, Councillor.
It's just one question.
At a high level, drainage, traffic flows, conflicts, cyclists riding, I want to call it Ada Street, heading down through Mitre 10 would be on a cycle lane. Then they'd go sort of around the parking bay. Then they'd go across Mitre 10. Then they'd be back on the roadway, and then they'd be back onto the footpath / shared path on the corner. So we'd have to work through how that all went from a usability but also a cost point of view. Is there enough space in that green grass area, if that's what I label it, for a bus, for instance, to unload its passengers, and would any cars behind that block out on Featherston Street, because there may not be enough width to get around the right-hand side of the bus, and is that another issue? So all those things would need to be worked through.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, guys, for the report. Just going to keep it short because most of my questions have been answered as well. On point 7.3, around the next steps, you said that it will be possible to carry out additional monitoring and evaluation. However, this will require a budget allocation to the annual plan. How much are we talking about?
It would depend on the type of report, maybe to mirror this report, and I will need to come back and confirm, but something in the order of $30,000 or $40,000 per monitoring. If there was an ongoing longer monitoring period, it may be sensible, for example, for council to purchase the equipment that's required. But I think that's a rough order, but I'll confirm that.
Cool. Second question is around the investigation that you're carrying in point on page 27, where you said investigation are ongoing into queuing safety outside Mitre 10, where you're monitoring vehicle volumes and speeds. When are we likely to have results of this finding?
We are still probably a few months away from that, councillor, from getting the definitive answer. We are trying to balance their driver behaviour, policing behaviour versus use of the road, and before we make any definitive conclusions, we want to be sure we understand the difference between road design, road layout and use, and driver behaviour.
And my last question is around the median travel times. At peak, you said at peak hours, bus services can stop every 15 minutes or so. So suppose this scenario was brought up to me. You said that the median travel times increased by 17 seconds and 13 seconds eastbound traffic for eastbound traffic. Suppose a bus arrives 1 minute or 2 minutes before schedule. What happens there? Do they park there, and cars just veer off the median?
So, yeah, so two points to make. One is that data that you're quoting, the median travel times, again, is the Waka Kotahi data. So in terms of how we could measure or use that data to look at public transport implications, that's difficult because it's not the data that we captured. But all of those 4 stops are not layover stops or scheduled stops, so they pick up and move on. They don't wait.
Good. Thank you.
And maybe just to add to that, another term is balancing stops, so they're not balancing stops to balance the time.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You'll be pleased to hear I only have one question. Chamber, good morning. Would you agree that wait times would be considerably longer if over 2,000 cars had decided not to use the stretch of road anymore? Like they were at the beginning when it first opened.
Certainly there's a correlation between the amount of vehicles using the road and wait times, and inherently it feels like if there's more traffic, the road is slower.
Thank you.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll definitely only have a couple of questions now. Councillor Arnott stole one of mine. But on that table on page 20 of our audit paper, we've got post-construction, pre-construction, and we've got the time slower. But then we've got a definite traffic volume that we've got a whole lot less traffic using the street. So, and we've got medium to heavy vehicles are down by about half. Can you tell me what streets they're using now?
The short answer is they're fanning out across our network, so they'll be dispersing across different routes. We can't definitively tell you which way car A or truck B is going.
Okay, so we're in hindsight though we're loading up other streets by moving them off Featherston Street.
Whenever we make changes in our road network that displaces traffic, they go onto other streets, yes.
Thank you. I'm trying to be fair, Councillor. I've tried to give everybody a fair go. Is it one question? I don't want anyone else to come in the queue. No, sorry, Councillor, I'm not going to let it happen because everyone else has come in the queue. Councillor, the Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Thank you, officers. Just a query. Do we already know what the minimum width requirement is for a safe/compliant shared pathway?
There's not one width. It depends on the volume of users, so a typical minimum volume might be 2.5. It might be 3 metres, but it depends on the volume.
Right. If Is there, if a shared pathway was put in by Just Zilch or across the road by McDonald's, could Palmerston City Council be liable if injury was caused as a result of that? You know, would we wear liability?
Certainly, in any work we do, we would always advise council to follow the appropriate standards. And if we deviated from the standards and there was an incident, certainly we're not in a good position.
And my final question, Madam Chair, was the fact that there is a school on that corner with 1,875 students approximately. Would you consider that volume to be have impactful on a shared pathway design or safety?
Yes to both.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to close the questions off. I think I've given everybody a good go, so I'm going to now move to the recommendations. So we have got this one in front of us, which I will move, seconded by Councillor Wood, and then we'll have the other recommendations which we'll put up. Thank you very much to the two officers, 3 people in front of us, for all the diligent question answering that you did for us. Thank you so much. We'll take this first one, which I think is fairly straightforward, which is just to receive that memorandum. If we can vote on that one first. We're going to comment on this one first. Hold on a minute. Sorry, we're going to comment just on, it's going to be tough because we're going to have all these other recommendations, so we're just going to comment on the report here. We're not going to comment on the other recommendations because they're going to come up individually. So save your comments if you're going to comment just for this one. That's what I'm trying to tell you, because you're going to have all of the others coming up. So just save it for this one, which has not got anything else in it but the report. Thank you, everybody. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll try and restrain myself and follow the instructions. I just wanted to say that as a whole, I think that this project has achieved what we wanted it to achieve. We set out to make safety improvements to Featherston Street, and the report indicates that safety improvements have been achieved. We set out to increase active transport, more people walking, cycling and using buses, and the report indicates that that's what we've achieved. Now, there's always trade-offs for achieving things, safety and increased active transport, but it seems to me that the slightly increased wait times are a reasonable trade-off. And when we look at businesses, and understanding that it's only a short period of time, there doesn't seem to have been an adverse effect on businesses. In fact, looking at the data, it would seem that businesses in this area are doing slightly better than businesses in the rest of the city as a whole, albeit that all of the business is down across the city because of the economic environment. So it was mentioned in public comment that my prime reason for supporting this was safety. And I'm glad that that was remembered, because I think actually the safety of our people is the most important thing. And to me, if someone has to wait a few seconds longer to go through a traffic light, or for a pedestrian to cross the road, that's a reasonable trade-off for getting an increase in safety. So I'm happy that the report has indicated that it's been a successful project. Now, that's not to say that I'm not open to further improvements, and that was the question that I asked the officer, you know, how could we improve this further? Because I recognise that some people are not happy and would like to see things changed. And as far as we can, I think we should be open to improvements. so long as it's in a reasonable cost and that it doesn't adversely affect the safety improvements that we've achieved. So that's my take on the project so far, and I'll have some comments to make about each of the individual additional recommendations as they come up. Thank you.
Lemire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, along with Councillor Johnson, I was really glad that I heard balance in some of the public comment today. I mean, I really feel for the businesses, and I'll comment on those in a moment, because I do think some of the numbers can be slightly taken in a different slant. But actually, our number one outcome here was safety. So if that's what we've done in slowing things down and creating some safety for quite a busy and formerly dangerous road or intersection, I think we've actually achieved that goal. There also was, and they're all different groups have said we've wasted all this money. We didn't fund this project. It wasn't actually our project. If you can recall, it was an NZTA project until they sort of backed halfway out of it through government intervention and changes. And that brought us to the traffic lights. I can recall going to the CE, the infrastructure manager and roading manager, and saying, the lights aren't synced properly. And they weren't. And they still weren't for some months. So we haven't had quite committed partners in this as well at different times. And so you'll see I'm responding a bit later on to some additional recommendations that may respond to some of those issues that are in this report. With the schools and the emergency services, we can only act on the information we get at the time. And the information I got at the time that came from officers and the consultants, interestingly all the consultants have disappeared, but we got told that emergency services did not use Featherston Street. I've got that in writing. So we can only act on what we've been told. They've now had a different chain of thought and they've said, no, it's not a great road for us, we can't use it, blah, blah, blah. But look, you can only act on the information you're given at the time. So we acted, and I just want to stick up for making a decision on information presented to you at the time. The second thing was around the schools. And yes, I did meet with the principal of Central Normal, but Boys High had told us that they were in favour of this. They changed their mind. So, you know, you can, again, and with Central Normal School, I spoke to the principal, but I was getting conflicting information from other people in the school. So we had to go and sort that out a little bit later in the CE, and I did find out that they were against it, or the management and the board were against it. Not sure if all the rest of the school was. But look, you can, again, I can just come back to we can only act on the information that you're given at the time. So those two bits of information were quite conflicting, and they've changed. The final one is the business, and I'm glad to see that the businesses in general haven't suffered as much. But I just want to say we have to be careful with stats, and I know we've got our economist in the room, but there are three big businesses there that are skewing the numbers slightly. Two of them are massive food businesses, and the other is a hardware business. Now, they make up the majority of that data. And look, business is tough for everybody, but they seem to do pretty well in all environments. The ones I'm really worried about are the SMEs. And if there was some data that was pulled out to show the true numbers of those, then we might get a better feel for it. My gut feel is it's not as bad as it was or perceived to be, but I don't think the numbers show a true reflection on what businesses are doing there. But look, I thank the officers for the report. I think this is always going to be a very mixed, you know, people have got very definite views on this. And I get lots of commentary around how good it is, believe it, I do. I get a lot of commentary about how good it is, but I also get some commentary about how terrible we are and how bad the street is. But at the end of the day, if the number one outcome was safety, then you have to put your hand up and say, we've probably succeeded in that. But I do think there is some, it's not against cycleways, but I think that's how we build them, and I think we could have possibly built this a little bit better, and I'll come to that with some potential opportunities to fix that, and I'll be looking for a report back to the council so we just don't have to make a decision straight on the fly. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also want to thank the staff for the work that they've done on this report. It's very clear. Before I start, probably what I wanted to say was, I just wanted to say that, you know, this issue has been a very challenging and difficult issue for the community as well, because, you know, and for elected members as well, because the amount of abuse as well that some elected members have coped over the last 2 years or so. First of all, I just want to thank the staff for the good work that they've done. We cannot falter the work, especially that they've done around the consultation process. I attended a lot of those meetings, and people were given the opportunity to submit. And some who are actually in opposition at the moment, as the Mayor alluded to, did support it at the very beginning. They were invited to the initial stage of the consultation, and many of them actually supported it. I acknowledge that there are a lot of mixed views in the community, and as the Mayor said, we've all received emails from people that have either supported it or did not support it. But the thing that I wanted to emphasize is that my overall or overarching principle in supporting this project was people's safety. That's what guided my decision, and I have no regret about it. Yes, it's true. There could have been better designs, or the road could have been designed better, or we could have welcomed even more, we could be open to more changes. But the overriding principle that guided, or the overarching paradigm that guided my decision is safety, and will always be safety. The objective of the project is to provide a safe and accessible accessible transport options for people who would like to employ alternative means of transport. And the report highlights that in 8 months, we've had 1 crash against 92 between 2019 and 2014. And that's the reason why I voted for this. Yes, we might not agree with the design entirely. Yes, I'm open to change, as Councillor Johnson. I'm open to some improvement to make the road more user-friendly, to say the least. But the overarching principle that guided my decision was safety. I may not entirely agree with the design, but this is where we got to. And we have options available to us in the future to make improvement to this road. So I'm open to improving the road with reasonable costs to the community. So I'll leave it at that. I'll have more time to comment on the individual recommendations that are coming our way.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Also just to echo the thanks to council officers and the consultants for the work that they've actually done on Featherston Street. It has been a difficult journey, to say the least. Look, I'm just going to start by saying that if we zoom out a little bit, is that our population in the next 10 years is actually going to grow by at least another 10,000 people. We'll be over 100,000 people. And with that, that'll be at least a 10% increase in the number of cars and vehicles actually trying to use our road network. And that'll lead to increased congestion. We can't make our roads any wider because they're urban, mixed urban, mixed commercial roads. So we can't actually make them any wider because, you know, people have actually got vested interest in their own property. So we have to align and manage our transport, that's heavy vehicles all the way down to pedestrians, in a much more efficient way. And that actually requires us to actually detune our roads, those roads that are actually overburdened with traffic. So doing nothing to our road network is really not an option. So that's where we have arrived. And I realise that there has been some pain into the point getting to where we are at the present time. But having said that, and other councillors have already alluded to it, is that this roadway is actually much safer now than it was. So if we take 5 years of data, there were 92 crashes, some very serious accidents down to minor injury over a 5-year period. Over a 7-month period, in the period that's been measured, we've had 3 accidents. And by my maths, just very, very roughly, on the back of a ciggy packet, it comes to about a 60% reduction in crashes. Now, I'm sure that if we actually had have asked the emergency services if they were actually pretty happy with the improved safety rates, I guarantee you ambulance, fire and police would be absolutely delighted. But they weren't asked that. All they were asked is, how do you find Featherston Street in terms of you going about your business? So nobody actually turned their mind to the safety aspect. So therefore, we actually have 3 letters sitting amongst our papers which actually have been used by, and Jimmy Elliam, I tell you what, I expect better of you, Jimmy, when you write an article, because you should have actually gone back and actually checked with the emergency services as to what they actually meant by the content of the letters. And what did that lead to? Another Facebook rash of disgusting comments, personal comments about councillors. We have fired this thing up beyond where it needs to be. There's been some very detailed financial analysis done in terms of the impact on businesses, and I do realise that some businesses will have taken a hit, but they're still in business. There is very little change across a number of years in respect of the financial impact, and some of that is actually through COVID and the post-COVID period. We've got a number of recommendations which we're going to talk about shortly, but I've actually had a look at those.
So, sorry, councillor, we're not talking about those at the moment.
Oh, but I'm just going to reference them, if I may. Thank you.
Sorry.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll have to come back into the queue and I'll talk about them shortly.
Sure.
Okay.
You're welcome.
The point is that there are going to be some options coming. They will not be funded by NZTA. There'll be no co-funding. And that's all I really have got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I appreciate that. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to have the mic back on. Nearly 12 months on, Featherston Street is a project we can justifiably be proud of delivering. Challenging, absolutely, but a big step in creating a far more livable city. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the sustained effort of staff, a number of key staff who have made this project possible and championed it throughout. 2 years ago, Featherston Street was way out of balance. Totally car-dominated, high-risk, unsafe, and the poor safety stats showed that. Today, it's a street that's in much better balance. Gives people real choices about how they're going to get from A to B. It's working better for 2 school zones and is matching economic performance across the city. I do appreciate that some members of the community are still quite concerned by this. There's some members of the community that have chosen to make this the issue that they want to continue to revisit again and again and again, but the numbers really don't lie on this project. It tells us the project's delivering safer speeds, similar travel times, markedly fewer accidents, markedly fewer heavy vehicles, more people going by bikes, more people on buses. This is what we set out to achieve, and this project is delivering. Now, it's obvious as well that not everyone is getting everything that they individually want. And unfortunately, that has embittered some people, as we saw aptly demonstrated this morning. But frankly, that's the nature of being in a community and working in complex projects like those that are on our transport network. It is about give and take and understanding that we do need to work together so that everyone in this city, everyone, has the ability to use the transport network in the way that suits their needs. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a short comment as we receive the memorandum. I really just wanted to draw our attention back to the very first point of the officer's report, was that we asked for this monitoring and evaluation. It might have been easier, and certainly politically easier, to have accepted the closure report a year ago and put that one in a bottom drawer, never to be talked to again. But we all heard clearly from across our community that there were ongoing concerns, rightly or wrongly, based on fact or people's experience, but we heard those concerns in this chamber, and as a result, this council requested the Chief Executive to monitor and evaluate the functionality of the Featherston Street safety improvements and report back twice. So yes, there has been an extended focus on the improvements that we've made to Featherston Street. And there will continue to be debate, I'm sure, in the public arena about whether those are indeed improvements, and some of those improvements are in the eye of the beholder, regardless of the facts, as Councillor Barrett has outlined them. But I did just want to draw attention to the fact that we have lent into the public feedback on this. We've not tried to cover it up. We've not tried to pretend we haven't heard those things. Regardless of where the weight of the conversation has come from, we've listened and we've responded to find out the facts and to enable us to make good decisions on it. And I hope that continues as we look at the further recommendations that are to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Zebellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the report. And I did just want to acknowledge everyone who's taken the time to write to us and to tell us how much safer they feel using this road as a cyclist or pedestrian, or have contributed to the survey or has been included in this report, and those who have given constructive suggestions. I've received a steady stream of this feedback for months now, and it's just very good to know that there has been some positive benefit experienced by some users, to the extent that they've felt the need to write to us and share that experience with us. I think that this should temper any absolutist statements that this is the worst thing that we've all ever done, ever. I have said before on this issue that we do need to think about all of the community and the users and balance that, and there are plenty of people in our community who cannot use a private vehicle for no fault of their own, due to their age or their circumstances, and it's not an option, it's not a choice for them, it's a necessity that there are other options for them to be able to get around the city. And if we take a majority view that most people use cars, we shut those people out, and I don't think that's what we're here for. And I just want to acknowledge the staff particularly. I am very, very aware of the toll that this backlash has likely had on you, and I wish we could have better protected you from what you have likely experienced. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the feedback from the community is one that has generated a lot of noise. And as far as balance go, I can understand why, because there was a very strong viewpoint right from the word go that there was concerns for the project, and yet I feel like a lot of the voices weren't recognised or considered. And so reflecting some of that, one was some of the businesses up that street, and that just dropped their turnover over this period to 1 or 2%, is actually a little bit light in the fact that there was a business, a barber down there, that significantly was affected and moved out. And there was only 20 small businesses thereabouts that it would have been good to actually go in and actually ask how they were going, actually, rather than using generic sums. And the feedback, Brian didn't mention it today, but he has mentioned it to me, that the retail takeaway coffee is down more than 5%. So there is some significant effects. As far as the baseline monitoring goes, it was even confirmed today that from the baseline data, we've been using a different methodology from the improvements since. And it appears that the baseline data was done in a winter season, and the following November report and then the April report have been following stats that were majority captured in spring and summer. And so you'd naturally expect to have an increase in those, the seasonal pattern of weather impact. it wasn't noted at all with the bus passenger numbers that the bus frequency has increased significantly too. And so I think that's another change to recognise why there might be a few extras boarding or taking the bus. When we looked at some of these other suggestions coming forward, I did reference back in questions that in the June 24 report, there was the quotes to reposition the bus stops to make them closer to the sidewalk and with the cycleway to come out the other side. It was unfortunate that those quotes got changed on the morning of the meeting from what was in the report from 960,000 to 1.2, so significant numbers for starters, but then tabled on the day, those figures increased to 1 million to 1.6 million for those treatments, which I personally thought was absurd, and to even have those considered in light of having a more robust, I guess, tender opportunity for people to say how much it would cost, because that cost certainly, there was reservation on using those costs to move, because no one's got the money to do that type of treatment. So overall, happy to receive this report, but just highlighting some of the concerns from businesses that have been a continued voice around this table and through the commentary in our ears, and then just highlighting some of my concerns still with the report on how it's been advanced. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to go back to page 20, the table on page 20 and the stats, 7 months versus 5 years. I don't care which way you twing those figures. You can't do a stat, 7 months versus 5 years, you can't do it. The other issue that I really have is where have those vehicles gone? Have we tested those other streets to see if the crash rate's up in those other streets where they've gone? Or is there more accidents on those other streets? Yes, I agree. The project appears like we've gained some safety. We've definitely moved some vehicles on. They're not using it. But we're a city that's continuously growing. And in that growth, every person isn't going to get on a bike or take a bus. They're still going to drive vehicles. So we get an increase in vehicles. So we need to consider seriously our wider network in our city, that if we want to make it work, we need to be able to allow for vehicles. We can't push them all out, they're not going to all go. Okay? If we put them on other roads, it's going to increase the crash rate and the accident rate on those streets. So we need to look at our network totally. And the ultimate answer to our network, and I've heard it said in this room before, when we did the Featherston Street model, that it's being done all around the world. Well, no, it's not. All around the world is being shared pathways. They don't throw the bikes on the road with the cars. They don't move the cars out so the bikes can have the road. What they do is they create a safer system where they have shared pathways, and it works all around the world. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to say I concur with Councillor Hancock and Councillor Barrett. For me, safety improvements that have occurred on Featherston Street, which used to be one of the city's most dangerous roads with frequent crashes involving cyclists and pedestrians, the upgrades that have taken with the raised crossings and separated cycleways have significantly reduced risks, with an evidenced, as we've been told this morning, 60% reduction in accidents. Cycling and walking accessibility. These cycleways and enhanced pedestrian crossings make the streets safer and more accessible for everyone, including children and those with disabilities. Place marking enhancements just across the road from Boys High School. There are additional features with that improve the street's character, making it a more welcoming space for the community. I think that the encouragement of sustainability transport, emphasising cycling, walking and public transport, these changes align with goals to reduce carbon emissions and encourage eco-friendly transport methods. Safer school zones, modifications near the schools, Central Normal and Palms North Boys High School, have created safer spaces for students with improved crossings and adjusted speed limits. There are some noted drawbacks which we've heard about, such as reduced car parking and wait times for vehicles at the Featherston Street intersection, but overall the focus has been on making Featherston Street a safer and more inclusive place for all road users. And I am really proud of the fact that we've made it a safer place and always open to improvements as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Madam Chair, I had a lot written down to read this morning, but I haven't even switched on my computer. All I will say is that, you know, these type of roading changes have been contentious all around the country, and probably no more so than the city of Palmerston North. I find it disappointing we're sitting here right now dealing with this yet again, and you know, we've got $500 million water decision that we've got to make soon, and so I find it disappointing. As someone that voted against this from the beginning, I listened to the voice around me, and that voice has never been louder. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of all the subjects and topics we've had in the council over the last 5 or 10 years, this one I think the social media piranhas have had a field day with. I think they've enjoyed it more than anything else. I've been attacked about it. I've been accused of doing things when I wasn't even at a meeting. I've been told how I voted when I was in Wellington, so it's amazing how the piranhas get their information. But not to dwell on that any longer, I have never, ever supported this at any meeting I've been at. I saw it after the first meeting and I had a good look at it and I thought, what a dog's breakfast. And nothing that has come up since has changed my mind. I've seen mistakes made and tried to be hidden. We had to move bus stops because it was so badly planned. On and on and on we go. And we get statistics put in front of us all the time. Like Councillor Meehan mentioned, talking about 7 months to 5 years. You know, that's statistics. Well, talking about Mark Twain, he had a saying, and then 2 other American presidents copied him, and I think 3 English prime ministers also made the same statement. And that statement was this: you've got statistics and you've got statistics, and you've got a lot of lies. Now, they're quotes from presidents, and that's the facts. The bottom line is, I use that intersection almost every day. It is slower. It is frustrating. And a lot of people won't go that way. Even at a public meeting just recently, the guest speaker from St John's said publicly, we have been instructed to stay away from that intersection at all costs. I think it's a dog's breakfast. I've always thought that. Nothing yet has changed my mind.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In my time around this table, this topic is probably one that challenged me the most in terms of considering the way I come to a decision. And each time through this process, we've been presented with a report and presented with further information. I've reflected on those things that drive my decision making, and I think there's 4 main things that I can identify that I can think drive my decision making. The first one being expert opinion, whether it be from staff or whether it be from consultants. The second one being the public view, which we always listen to and invite. The third one being my own perspective, which is driven through my own view and values, and hopefully there's a level of common sense there, as with everyone around the table. And the fourth one being the cost and benefit and weighing that. And the weight that each of us give those four aspects is going to be different for every decision. And there's definitely been many times through this process where I've considered, have I given appropriate weight to each of those aspects that inform my decision making? And there have been times that I have questioned whether I made the right decision. Back in September, when we made that, gave the go-ahead for this project. This report is really helpful in giving me some assurance that perhaps we did make the right decision. That's not to say that I'm entirely happy with every aspect of the design. When we gave that go-ahead, I did have some serious misgivings about some aspects of the design, and I've gone back and watched that video, and we certainly gave the consultants a significant level of interrogation over why some of those aspects were in there, and the weight that I gave the expert at that time, it may be different going forward, and that's not to disrespect any consultant or any staff opinion, but there are some aspects to the design that still don't make a lot of sense to me when I drive down that road, in particular the parks and the way that you have to sort of jut in around that. If we had the time over, I would think it would be better to get rid of them. The in-lane buses is also one of the aspects that I seriously have some misgivings about. Having come to where we've come to, this report shows that it's now safer, and fundamentally I'm really pleased about that, and that is really high in terms of my values, in terms of what drives my decisions. So I'm pleased that the stats that I believe are objective that are in this report does give us some confirmation that what we set out to achieve, we have actually achieved. So those four things will continue to inform my consideration of the next resolutions that will come before us today. But I do want to acknowledge all the people who have put input into this, the public, the community, staff, consultants, and each one of you around the table. I think we've all given this project significant consideration. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you. Just want to do a brief comment myself. All I wanted to say is I actually appreciated what Councillor Bowen said. I think that we have had a lot of public feeling over this, and with a petition that's out there, I know a lot of you have seen that petition, which has got over 4,000 votes on Featherston Street. So there is a lot of feeling out there about Featherston Street, so people are very uptight and angry about what we have done as a council, and we have to own that because it is a council decision. So we know there are people out there that are angry about what we've done on Featherston Street, and that's our decision as a council. But at the end of the day, we support our officers, and I want to thank our officers for the work that they've done over the project, and also for what they have done today in answering all our questions, because you've done a very good job today, so thank you for that. But now I just want to say, let's go forward and vote on this one item, and then we'll have a process going forward for the others. Thank you, everybody. So that has passed 14 votes for and 2 against. So what we're going to do now is break for morning tea. After morning tea, we'll go through each of these four. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 recommendations. One's been withdrawn. We'll go through them all individually. And then we can, and what we'll do 3, 4, and 3 against. We won't have anyone else in the queue if you're for or against it, and then there'll be nobody else. We're going to be quite tight on that. 4 and 3 against. We're going to be very tight on that, so if you miss out on the queue, I'm sorry. Tough bickies. Try and get into the queue. So I'm only going to do 3, 4 and 3 against. I'm very tough today. Back at 5 to 11. Okay, welcome back everyone. Please take your seats. We'll get back into these recommendations. The first recommendation, we'll have it up on the screen. Okay, I'll read it out. It's refer a capital program. Please can we have some quiet, please? That a capital program to the annual budget deliberations to reinstall a left-hand turning lane into Rangatiki Street from Featherston Street and safety direct cyclists onto the footpath to create shared pathways at the intersection on receiving an officer's report. Moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Wood. Now remember the rules around this, 3 for and 3 against. That's all we're doing. Okay, if you don't get in the queue, you snooze, you lose. Right, go. The Mayor.
I suspect I'm going to be on the timer with this one too, so I won't take too long, people. Look, the big thing I've done here is I've responded to our report, but also I've added in, which was different to perhaps some earlier material received, and this is around on receiving an officer report. Now, speaking to officers, they can pull together a high-level report relatively quickly on this, and it will take away some of the questions, and I have to say perhaps some of the misinformation that's been bounding around as well. So first of all, it was great to hear some balance here today around the report, and my recommendations, and I've got a couple after this, are really in answering some of those pretty serious issues that still are identified in the report around Featherston Street. But on balance, again, I don't want to repeat what we've all spoken about, the safety, but actually that was the number one. Got to remember that. And I've had plenty of positive commentary around Featherston Street too, just to balance the argument. Yes, I've had some negative stuff, but I'd actually have to say I've had more positive than negative. But I agree there is another petition in the mix there as well. But I just want to highlight that the stuff we've got is mixed, all right? So on that, I do think it shows that we do have some issues around the road carriageway, and this is around balance. And again, I'm just come back to that balance discussion. And I did actually ask for some of this some months ago, but to be fair to officers, they do need some direction on this. Look, all I'm asking for here is really what was there previously, a 20 to 25 metre length of a turning bay. Now, those councillors have been around a little bit longer, can recall we had this discussion around Cuba Street. Remember? So Cuba Street, the public, the retailers, the landowners said, you're mad closing off a left-hand turn. And we went against officer advice or best practice. If I have $1 for every time I hear that, I'll be a millionaire. But we went against that and we put a left-hand turn in, and surprise, surprise, it works. So what I'm saying is here, let's just understand whether it's possible, keeping the safety aspects of our cyclists. And I just want to point you to either Christchurch City or Auckland Transport. There are many, many shared pathways. We've got one ourselves over the Fitzherbert Bridge, which is very narrow. But there'll be some, I'm sure there's going to be some caveats to this. And if we don't meet it, that's fine, but let's try and do that. So I just want to point you to Victoria Street, Nelson Street, way busier than this intersection. And they go from the road onto the shared pathway, the footpath. I walk it a lot because it's close to a couple of our city partners. And you've got bikes on one side of the painted line and you've got pedestrians on the other. And it works and encourages a very, very busy intersection to function as well. So I'm just saying, let's explore that. It does take away also the real fear I have around the business community is the delivery access. And what made me galvanise this a bit more was going through there the other day and watching bid food trucks and other trucks trying to get in and out of those big entities there, and their leases come up. And people operate on on how they can get things in and out. And if we're going to make it really, really difficult, then we're going to create an even bigger issue than already exists. So this is about reacting to the report, if it's possible. If it isn't, then at least I've put something forward. It's on receiving an officer report, so I want you to have an open mind before you count it down. Now, the cost for doing this could be very, very minimal. Taking out some separators, creating a shared pathway, which can be as simple as paint. There's other ways of doing it as well that could be more costly. But I just want to get an understanding of what that is, and if we even meet the designation of a shared pathway. My understanding is we possibly could, being judged on what's happened up in Auckland and down in Christchurch. So please keep an open mind with this.
Thank you. Remember to stick to what's on the screen for answering this. For or against, Councillor Naylor? Yeah, well, I don't know if Councillor Naylor is going to, but for or against, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Can I speak now?
Yeah.
I won't be supporting this recommendation. Three main reasons, and those are reasons that were stated from experts today. The first one being that the cost of this will be substantial, is what the officers told us when I asked that question this morning. The Mayor said it will be very minimal, but what staff have said is that it would be substantial. And the second reason is that staff have said that this would lose the benefit of the safety at the intersection, and this is where the main conflicts are. And staff have also said that it would undermine the intention of this project. So I believe that we do have all the information already based on the report and the answers to questions, that I'm quite happy to make a call on this now rather than adding another complex issue to an already overburdened annual budget. So definitely won't be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hancock, for or against?
Sorry, I've got a couple of questions,
Sure.
Madam Chair. Thank you. Just to the mover, the way this is framed at the moment really is just to actually refer a capital program to the annual budget for deliberations. It does not talk about the feasibility of what they're talking about or the impacts, including safety considerations. So I'm just wondering if the mover is actually happy to include those kind of sentiments in the recommendation.
Look, I would expect there'd be a paragraph or two around that. I'm looking for a high level. I don't want to create, as Councillor Naylor said, another overtaxing report. This is more of a desktop. It'll survive or it won't survive. So yes, there'll be an element of that, Councillor, but I wouldn't expect them to go and do surveys and all that sort of thing. It's just an understanding. Does it fly or does it not fly?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, the second question really is just something which I wanted to ask earlier on in terms of the changes for this recommendation and others. Will it attract NZTA funding?
No, it will not attract any NZTA funding.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll speak against this. I think that referring this to the annual budget in the form that it is currently is it's pretty shallow, to be fair. This would be a cost to our ratepayers, which I think is something which we can ill afford. And if we just don't understand the safety implications and the disruption that this will actually cause to the flow of traffic, which has actually already been very, very well canvassed and planned and everything else. If you just look at sort of all of the benefits that we've got from the project so far, less traffic, less heavy traffic, slower average speeds, more cyclists, more bus passengers, more pedestrians, and it's far safer. So why would we actually just add another thing in which we just really don't actually understand the implications or the consequences of it? So I will be voting against it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Johnson, for or against?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've just got a question. Where it says refer a new capital programme, how much capital are we referring there?
That is the question, really. What we're working through at the moment is the length of the safe turning lanes. At a high level, to remove the current cycle lane on both those left turn lanes, we would need to move the lanes across and over to get that extra space. The cycle lanes are in short, narrower than what we need for a traffic lane, so we need to remove all of the current markings from the road, so we need to mill those off, we need to remove the separators, we need to recut in the cycle the traffic loops, remove the cycle loops and cut in the traffic loops. We need to change some of the street lighting and utilities on the footpath, the design and the safety at a really, really high level. 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 for that work would be my guesstimate, but that's at a really high level.
Okay, thank you. And when would it be intended that we would receive the officer report? Would that be at the time of the debate at the annual budget deliberations, or would that be coming sooner?
Officers could give a very high level, a few paragraphs about what I've just explained with some rough order costs. The process of doing the design for this is 2 or 3 months work. Design, safety audit, reviews, the iterations that we need takes 2 or 3 weeks. We wouldn't be able to have this back in 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy not to speak on it. That's fine. Let someone else have a chance.
Thank you. Councillor Zabellin.
And thanks, Madam Chair. I am interested to see a greater exploration of these safety issues. I think for cyclists to be removed from the live lanes at this intersection, considering that they would naturally slow down on approach to the intersection, that potentially could mitigate some of those concerns about the impacts on pedestrians which caused the shared path not to be considered in the first place. I'm not opposed to having an indication to consider further. I think the idea of a shared path, especially if the cycleway could be diverted into the grass berm that extends to a shared path to the intersection, is at least worth exploring. And I'd want to see an officer's report at least. A better outcome for Just Zilch is something that I've talked about before, and I would want to see that report, and at the very least it shows the public that we're willing to look at pinch points, so I will support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr Mayor, to second this and have this debate. On any vote I make in the chamber, I spend a lot of time reflecting on whether or not I made the right call, and I'm certainly not above if the feedback shows in the community that I made a mistake. And what I reflect on this project is that when I saw the designs, I felt we could get a better balance between safety and usability of the road. For me, that was enough to not support the project to start with, and request that we looked at some alternative options. We then had a residents' petition where about 9 to 1 in our community didn't support the project. At that point, I would think we should reconsider whether we've got the design balance right. We've then had multiple businesses from the street come and make submissions to us and personal emails to us and a whole range of communication with councillors. At that point, I would think we would consider, have we got the design quite right? We then have 2 schools on the road sharing that they're not fully happy with the design and think there are things we could do better, and at that point I think we'd reflect, have we got the design quite right? But even if all of those things aren't enough for you to consider whether or not we need to look at some changes, surely a report in this paper from emergency services saying that they believe this design has made it harder for them to respond to emergency requests would be a point that we would consider, have we got this design quite right? And so I'm very supportive of doing this. The question from Councillor Hancock around if we don't understand the safety implications, why would we do this? That's exactly why we do this. As I said, to understand what the safety implications are, to understand what that would be, and potentially what would come to the annual budget as an officer's request for some budget to do that investigation as a result of the report. And if that's the case, then I'm very happy for that to be considered and debated there. But to just write it off and say it can't be done, it's not possible, we're not willing to look at it, at this stage, I don't believe responds to the feedback that we've had from our community. The other questions around the cost being substantial, again, that is what officers said at a high level. If we are to do a fully engineered, fully separated with a whole lot of barriers, all those things, yes, it might be quite substantial. Or we could look at a model more like what the Mayor suggested, where we use, effectively just lower the curb, you can go onto the path for a moment, cross the road and then go back off. That might not cost as much. I'm not a traffic engineer. I can't tell you today that it's going to cost $1 million or $100,000. Let the officers do that work, and then we can make an informed decision when it comes to the annual budget whether or not this is the right thing to do. But I feel we have got the balance wrong at this point, and it is worth investigating whether or not we could reinstate that turning bay to improve the usability of the road and respond to residents' feedback. So I hope, councillors, we could have the open mind to look at what that would be and then make a call down the track when we've got that information.
Thanks, councillor. We've had 3 for and 2 against. Does anybody else want to vote against? Because I'm not taking any more for. Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to comment on this. First, to reflect a little bit around petitions, and it's good to hear that the petitions are on people's mind. First, just for those that referred to it in the singular, there are 2 petitions, and yes, indeed, one of them is running far in excess of the other. It is not, though, in great contrast to actually the proportions of people that use different modes. I'm not at all surprised to hear that in a city where an overwhelming majority of people are almost entirely reliant on cars, they're backing it. And that where there are fewer people that use active modes, that fewer people are backing that. So I simply see the 9-to-1 ratio that is easily observed in the submission, in the petitions, as reflecting of the mode share. And I think that's entirely reasonable. The question fundamentally is whether we want a safe and livable transport network.
We're sticking to the recommendation, councillor.
Coming to the recommendation, Madam Chair, I do appreciate the Mayor's trying to find some compromise here, but I'm not convinced, and especially after hearing the Q&A this morning, that a shared path is a useful change. It's certainly a breakage in continuity of what's there now. It would create conflict between bikes and pedestrians, and some of those accidents can be quite significant. It would also create conflict between bikes and cars, because I would expect that some of the more gung-ho people on bikes would just flick a quick look over their shoulder and then barrel straight on through the intersection and into serious harm. So it might look good, it might even look good on paper, but I don't think that we actually have something there that would do anything other than significantly undermine the safety outcomes that we have just spent a good part of the morning commenting on. So I've heard enough in the Q&A. Do appreciate the officer's response to questions there, and I think we're quite comfortable voting this down at this stage, and encourage colleagues to do that and save ourselves the trouble of rediscovering the obvious, which will come through in the report, which is that it might sound good, but it's not actually a safe solution.
Thanks, councillor. Right to reply.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, colleagues. Look, it's all about balance. If you think the report and everything's going really, really well, then vote this down. If you have an open mind, then perhaps vote for it. What we're trying to do here is not be closed off, not being shallow, actually completely the opposite. We're trying to look at perhaps, are there some other ways? Now, there may not be, but you're making a very, very closed off account of everything if you vote this down. This isn't about the car versus non-car or cyclist, as you, Councillor Barrett, barrelling through and possibly getting hit. It is actually about other users as well, and other organisations and businesses around it. I've just seen the potential access issues that we've created, and we could have an economic nightmare on our hands if we don't just have a look at potential, and I say potential opportunities around the intersection, keeping the safety aspect at heart as well. So it may not work. It does work in other cities. To be fair to the officers, I'm interested that they've got numbers around things when they have not really, I haven't briefed them on anything other than the CE and the General Manager. So I think there should be an open mind there too about what can be done. So let's get an officer report and then we know what we're dealing with. So please have an open mind, think about what can be done here. It may not work, but at least we've got an opportunity to think about things and respond. And again, I emphasise the word balance here. This is not a resident versus resident thing or a car versus non-car thing. This is about just seeing, is there a better way of dealing with that intersection, which I don't believe is 100% at the moment. Thank you.
Right, let's vote. That's passed 11 votes to 5. Right, moving on to the next recommendation. I'll read that out. Refer repositioning the 4-lane bus stop on Featherston Street between Araha and North Street to curbside position, with bike riders passing to the right for stationary buses by entering the live traffic to the 25-26 annual budget. Yep. Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by myself. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't speak too long on this because this is a debate that we've had in the chamber some time ago, but I think now that we have this report in front of us, it's important we reflect on the position that we're in as a community. Public opinion is not an exact science, and I think we've all felt very clearly that this has been one of the glaring examples, the jewels, if you'd call it, of the project in terms of public opposition. It's been made very clear by the public that even if it doesn't necessarily lead to people taking hours longer to get through the street, even if it doesn't necessarily lead to some of the negative things, people certainly feel aggrieved by the fact that if a bus stops in the middle of the road for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it may be, depending on peak times, that is an issue for them. And for me, in the considerations that Councillor Naylor spoke about earlier, serving the community is certainly one of my top priorities. And when we have strong community feedback that this feels unnecessary, and certainly when we look at the rest of our network where all but these 4 bus stops are not in lane, I think it's appropriate that we can consider this as part of the annual budget and where it might be able to find the appropriate savings in other areas to fund this kind of program. I'd put to you the information that we had after we last made a decision about this, that was borne out by some questions and councillor help by Councillor Dennison, showed that the $251,000 cost that was put on removing each of those stops was only made up of 23% actually doing the physical work. 57,000 of that was doing the work to remove the stops. 147,000 of that was for contract administration, traffic management, and project management. Which, if you're trying to change something like this, and traffic management's going to cost you 3 times the cost of doing the work, I think it would be fair to say we could look at doing it at night or look at doing it in other ways. And then 46,000 of that was just contingency, a 22% contingency for the project overall. So I feel that is new information from when we last considered this, that actually there may be considerable room to move on the cost of changing these bus stops. And I think it's completely appropriate that we consider that in light of the community feedback. So I'll leave it at that. I'm interested in the debate and I hope we can support referring this to the annual budget for consideration.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. Just a question, I guess, to the mover at this stage. The last recommendation, which you seconded, did indicate a report coming back. Is there any expectation that this would be accompanied by a report that might speak to some of the implications of the proposal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, it's a good question. The difference in terms of this item is we have already had a report to this chamber where some of that's been teased out. I believe it was around June last year. So versus what the Mayor's proposing was a completely new idea. So this, the wording for this recommendation is taken from that report that we considered more than 6 months ago. If councillors would prefer that we got a report back leading into the annual budget deliberations, I'd be happy to add the same wording from the last one, as per a report back to the chamber.
Great, thanks. And just a question probably for officers, what feedback have we had from bus drivers? What feedback have we had from Horizons about how well these are currently functioning?
We have, as per the report, last November's report, we had a letter from Horizons reflecting the view of bus drivers that they valued the inland bus stops because they didn't have to concern themselves with turning into a bus stop and, more importantly, turning out into traffic. In terms of this recommendation today, as far as I'm aware, Horizons isn't aware that this is being posited today.
Great, thank you. I'll keep the mic and speak briefly on it. This is something that I'm very uncomfortable with. I think the idea of just shoving bike riders out into a live traffic lane, as it's indicated there, it's probably more of a dead traffic lane, frankly, when some of those collisions might occur there. So it's not the kind of thing that I have any appetite for at all. There's been 0 accidents associated with the in-lane bus stops, and we've had positive feedback from both from Horizons and from bus drivers around how well that's working and how problematic it would be to revert to other approaches. So I'm very much concerned by this proposal that's in front of us here today. As we've just heard, it hasn't been socialized with Horizons, and I think if we're going to move in this space, it should be done in consultation with, rather than to the network operator. Moving these buses to the curbs just creates a whole lot of more mixing zones, collision potential, and really it's just accidents waiting to happen. And this would significantly undermine the safety outcomes that we've just put significant effort into achieving. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just in reviewing the report from when we last looked at this recommendation, it really clearly states in the report that the risk profile to vulnerable users cannot be mitigated. And given that there's no medium strip or a reduced median strip and there is a narrower road carriageway, this does actually put vulnerable road users at a greater risk because of the narrower road, and for the sake of 30 seconds or so time savings. That's tangible risk versus agreed feelings. I'm going with tangible risk, so I'll oppose this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Just to indicate that I'm not prepared to support this. We already know that there's substantial cost in the order of $1 million associated with doing this. And I think referring it to the annual budget deliberations would be just a little hypocritical of me, since I wouldn't intend to support it in the annual budget deliberations. So, you know, I could look open-minded by giving it the tick today, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to be supporting an additional cost of $1 million to the community to do this in the annual budget deliberations, and trying to be consistent in my decision-making, the same reason that I didn't support an additional $1 million from the Massey Fund to be granted to the Massey Foundation for development of a botanical garden the other day going to the annual budget deliberations. I won't be supporting this going there either. And I would caution elected members who are thinking, well, you know, we'll just push this off onto the annual budget deliberations. We already know that things are extremely tight. We're looking at a rates increase of 7.7%. With this and the Massey, that's an extra 2 million. We were probably looking at over, I don't know, maybe up to 8.5%, 9%, just off the top of my head. So I can't think that this would gain any support. So it's better to just be realistic at this point. There are some improvements that could potentially be made at lower cost, and I'm happy to support investigating them. We already know the potential cost of this, and I think it's just too much. So I'm not prepared to support it.
I've had 3 against. Any more for? Thanks, Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to support this. I think this is one of the reasonable things to reconsider. The costings that we got in June last year, as Councillor Woods also outlined, had some huge contingencies and inflated figures in to make it up to $1 million. And I believe we could easily cut through some of that, putting it out to a wider audience that would want to do this work. The other thing I was wanting to maybe have consideration of the mover and the seconder, where it says repositioning the 4-lane and lane bus stops, whether you'd be open to repositioning and or removal of the 4-lane bus stops. I'd open to that consideration. Thank you. I just think if we're going to have a look at repositioning them, we know that the costings did have some design come through, but actually, if we're going to look, maybe there's a mix that might still be open for its ultimate removal, to make sure that we have the safety elements well considered on that 900 metres. Thank you to you both for putting this forward.
Okay, I'm also going to speak for it as well, and very happy for them to go in. Yep. So that's the final of the 3 for and 3 against. Thank you. So we'll now look to vote. I'll just give the final right of reply back to the mover.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for the debate. I think there are 2 key differences to consider this time versus last time that we considered this. One is last time we were being asked to create an unbudgeted expenditure line, which would have caused change to our budgets for this year. By requesting it goes to the annual budget deliberations, it gives us the opportunity, rather than adding it as unbudgeted expenditure, to look at where it could be offset. I would challenge Councillor Johnson slightly. The Massey grant would have been an operational cost. This would be a capital cost, given it's to our network, would be my understanding. But certainly we would deal with it in the annual budget. But last time it was presented to us, my understanding was it was a capital upgrade. So I don't think it would be fair to say this would put 0.8% on the rates. That isn't what it would do in effect. The other key difference is the budget breakdown, as I spoke about in my opening comments. And as Councillor Dennison referred to, there is significant contingency there, and frankly, any project with three quarters of the cost is administering the project and only 25% is delivering it, is well outside the scope of any other commercial project delivery that you would expect in the private sector or that I would expect in the public sector. So I think there is certainly room to move on that budget, and that's what I would expect as we go through that process. One of the things I find difficult in this debate is the argument that this is the only way it can be done, and as Councillor Barrett said, that he's not comfortable with cyclists having to do, in my opinion, what they do in every single other street in our city, at every single other bus stop in our city. And so I don't think it's fair to suggest that it can't be done, nor do I think it's fair to suggest that it is so dangerous that it isn't feasible, given that's what we do everywhere else in Palmerston North, on many other streets with cycle lanes where cyclists move around the bus stop.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I apologise for interrupting the speaker, but I think this is a point where perhaps the speaker has misrepresented the staff comment. And I think it would be relevant to have it clarified by staff in terms of the issue around expensing the asset and whether it's actually an operational cost, as Councillor Johnson had outlined, or whether it be, when it's doing something that's already been done, whether that can be capitalised twice. I think that would be useful, as it may well help inform decision making.
Cam, can you answer that question? Did you hear it? I know you were talking. Sorry.
Could you please repeat the question? Apologies.
So my point of order was to clarify from staff. There was a comment from staff about this work needing to, having to expense an asset and it being a non-operating expense, and the comment was made that that would have an impact on our operational costs. Another comment has been made that this is a capital cost, and I'm questioning which is correct, because I thought that staff had said that this as a capital cost can't be spent twice if it's undoing something.
I think I understand the question through you, Madam Chair. So if you were to remove the asset that's currently in place, the costs that you have capitalised to date would be expensed, or better term, written off, because it's no longer an asset to the council. So that's a non-cash movement. If you are pulling the asset out and say you weren't to replace it with anything, then the cost of actually pulling the asset out would be an expense as well, because no asset going in its place. if you're putting a different type of asset in, say a new bus stop, which would be a new capital treatment, that would be capitalisable, that portion of it, and we would have some discussions around just how much of pulling out the old one would feature as a necessity of actually building the new one. I hope that helps clarify.
No, can we just let Councillor Wood finish his? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wood.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Naylor, for the point of order, because it is a fair question to ask. My understanding of the officer's commentary earlier was it would be a non-cash expense, so effectively you would take the asset off your books, which would reflect a loss, but wouldn't lead to that money being then put onto the rates. And as the officers have just said, a portion of that, there could be a small amount that was operationalised, but the majority of that would be a capital cost, is the feeling I got from that answer, which I'm getting a nod. So my comment was I don't feel it would be equivalent to putting $1 million of operational expense on the rates, because the largest portion of it, in fact almost all of it, would be capitalised in building a new asset. So regardless, look, if officers came back to us in the annual budget and they said this is going to put $1 million on the rates, well then we'll debate that then. But that's certainly not what I feel that we're discussing. We're discussing a capital improvement to the road. I think we'll leave it there, but I think this is sensible, councillors. This responds to the needs of our community. At least give us an opportunity to consider how we could offset this as part of the annual budget discussion. It is not free to fix mistakes, and if we feel we have made a mistake by putting these bus stops in the road, there is no free way we can fix that. And I am perfectly comfortable with finding areas that we can make savings to fix the issues that we have caused. So I hope you can support this.
Thanks, everyone. It's failed 9 votes to 7. Thanks, everybody. Let's move to the final one for the additions. Okay, it's work with NZTA to resync the traffic lights so that we can have more cars travel through each phase on receiving an officer's report. Moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Wood. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, like the first recommendation I put up, this is on receiving an officer report to understand whether this is indeed feasible or not. It was in response again to our report and some of the commentary in there from the public, who actually was in agreement with what we've done on Featherston Street, but made the comments about turning lights. And I know a lot of councillors probably don't travel Featherston Street now because it's probably a bit too congested, but actually some of the congestion is developed by turning lights being red. And just to get an understanding of why that is, be fair to say NZTA, the officers have told us that they're in great communication with them. Just want to actually make sure that we are doing that, and we are getting something out of that via an officer report. So again, it's keeping an open mind, seeing if there is any improvements we can make there, because to date, I haven't seen a huge amount of them. So please keep an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is more of a question, really, because it was my understanding from the officer's report and answers to questions that I raised about this, that this work is already happening. So the recommendation would be redundant in that regard. I wondered if officers could comment.
Glenn.
Just so I'm clear of the recommendation, please, the ongoing work working with NZTA is definitely that ongoing. If we're talking about a complete overhaul, a remodelling, a major review, that's not the work we're doing. If we're going back to basics and rebuilding everything to do with the traffic lights, there would be a cost that we'd probably need on that to work with NZTA. Certainly though, the minor work, we are doing that.
So to the mover then, Madam Chair, is the intention of the recommendation to continue minor works to get better outcomes, or is the mover suggesting a complete rework which would need budget associated?
Look, it's hard not to get a bit angry here. This is around understanding, as the report said, there is some stuff that could be done. It's not a total rework, as the office is suggesting. It's actually, and I can tell you now, I'm unsure whether this work is actually happening in my conversations from a mayoral office with NZTA. So I just want to understand from the officers, can we do this at more of a minor level, not a total reset? So I've never suggested a reset at all.
Thank you for that clarification, and I'm not trying to be awkward about this. There does seem to be a gap between what the officer was suggesting is happening and perhaps the messaging that comes through the Mayor's office. So on that basis, that this isn't a reset, that this is minor works, I'm happy to advance that work with NZTA and have a recommendation go up to do that.
Thanks, Councillor. Looks like no one else wants to speak. So, do you want to write a reply? Okay, we'll look to vote. Thank you. Look, hope we can tell that. Okay, thanks, everybody. We'll go straight to the vote. Let's pass 15 votes for and none against. Someone hasn't voted. Can everyone check they voted, please? Who hasn't voted? Okay, it's Rolly. Okay, that's 16 votes for and none against. Thank you, everyone. Right, we've got the last one. We want to get this in before we go to lunch because we have got visitors at 1 o'clock. Okay. Direct the Chief Executive to investigate a bus and vehicle pick-up and drop-off zone and other options in large green space reserve on Featherston Street opposite Boys High to inform future annual budgets. Moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wood. Right. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm referring this back to annual budget. I've also added in other options which Councillor Bellin actually identified. And if you can recall, an original design up at Summerhill sort of included something similar to this, which again thought of the safety of our cyclists and pedestrians, but also looked at the practicality of what is happening on Featherston Street outside Boys High. Now, the rector, and in fact they've written to us as to the city and myself around the issue they're having with us there. So this could go some way to alleviating that, and I'm open to ideas here. Yes, it won't attract NZTA funding because it wasn't part of the original design of this road, and I'm saddened by that because it was actually a pretty easy win for everybody. The road reserve was actually set up for this many years ago for a drop-off pickup zone and to alleviate the issues that we have on Featherston Street. Now also, just in the back of my mind, and surely some of you as well, is all the bus services are changing around the city with the Ministry of Education. This might go some way in the future to perhaps help what will become an even difficult position for us and the school. So look, please keep an open mind. It's again around informing annual budgets, and then we'll figure out from officers what our options are. Again, please, it's just keeping an open mind on things. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I'm keen to see what could come of this. I had requested in the past that we'd looked at using that green space for the actual cycle lane itself, and we were assured at the time that it just simply couldn't be done because it was out of scope or out of funding with the Transport Choices or Streets for People program. So if we are charging forward with this ourselves, we are released from those restrictions. And I would like to see us look at moving the cycle lane onto that grass berm area so that pick up and drop-off traffic is not pulling across the cycle lane, it's actually still separated. That seems to make more sense to me and likely cheaper to create a surface for cycles than it is to create a surface for cars. And it has that added benefit of reinstating some service provision for Just Silch. And if we are looking at a shared path on the approach to the intersection, it makes sense to me that you would start at that grass berm and carry it on to the intersection. Again, the cyclists would be slowing on approach to the intersection, and they'd still be separated away from those live road carriageways. So I'd hope that we can reduce some of those safety issues around the car moving drop-offs, which we are seeing. I've seen that loads of times outside Boys High, where the cars are just sort of slowing to almost stop, and then boys are hopping out. The cars are taking off. So it's to inform future annual budgets. It doesn't commit us in terms of time or money, so I'd be very keen to explore this further. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Madam Chair, mine was a question. Just in terms of future annual budgets, is that including the current annual budget that we're consulting on? And secondly, do we have any cost estimates of this from staff at this stage?
Cam, can you answer that?
Through you, Madam Chair. In terms of the second part of the question, cost estimates, no, I'm not aware of any. In terms of the first part of the question, I guess the timing is a decision of council. However, we would have to come back to you around the feasibility of timing and that sort of thing. It might be something that requires discussion through the next year that informs the future year, but that would have to be something that those who are more expert than me would have to come back with.
Okay, thank you.
No comment? Okay. Anyone else got a comment? Okay, we'll look to vote. Oh, wait for reply? Okay, we'll look to vote. Thank you. That's passed 16 votes for and none against. Right, we're going to go to an easy item before lunch. We're going to go to item number 9. We're not going to do parking. We're going to fly over parking. Go to item number 9, which is on page 127. Glenn, come back. So page 127. Thank you. He didn't hear it, wasn't listening, was it? Right, it's nice and easy. We're in your hands.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hopefully it's street in full lighting we're discussing, yes. Councillors, in recent times we've spent a bit of time discussing this around the council table. So to recap, this is a 6-monthly infill lighting report and update. In March, Council resolved to include $120,000 in the draft annual plan for consultation to undertake a streetlight survey. Once that survey had been undertaken, officers will prepare a work plan and associated costings and bring that back to the council table for consideration. Happy to take any questions on the report.
No questions? Great, okay. I'll look to move the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Thank you, because you're asleep, Councillor Wood. Right, okay, that the committee received the report, street light infill, presented to the Economic Growth Committee on the 9th. Thank you very much, Glenn. So I don't have any comment. No one else seems to have any comments, so we'll look to vote. Thanks, everybody. We are trying to get Stacey back so we can get into the economic report. Oh, has everyone voted? Rolly?
Oh, Mayor's not here.
Mayor's not here. Okay, that's passed 15 votes for and none against. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll do number 11. Glenn, you're back in the seat because we can't find Stacey. So we've got the road maintenance 6 monthly update on page 135. Thank you, Glenn. Big day today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report gives the latest update on the road maintenance contract that is a substantial amount of council expenditure per year. In short, the footpath program, the renewal maintenance work continues, although as councillors will recall, that program got cut back fairly heavily due to the NZTA funding reductions, and that's the maintenance program. The road sweeping, I was going to say that I've said in the report the hot dry period, well certainly it's been reasonably hot but it's not dry anymore, but the hot dry period that we've had in the last 6 weeks has increased the early leaf fall, so our street sweeping works has probably started a lot earlier than what we could reasonably expect, and there is some budget pressure in that area. Traffic services, just picking out a couple of highlights. We've got some figures in here about our street lighting network being 99% lit at the last night survey we did, so about 100 odd lights, 97 lights that are out. Want to pick up on the excellent work that PowerCo is doing with council officers, and their relationship with us is very strong, and that benefits our street lighting network, and that issues that inevitably come up are getting resolved quickly and professionally. So I do want to acknowledge PowerCo's work in that. Our chip sealing resurfacing program, which is a fairly substantial bit of work, I want to update the 90% complete that I've got in this report to 100% complete, or 99.9% complete. That's gone very well this year, and no major problems. One of the areas I want to highlight is the pavement rehabilitation. So that's not a resurfacing, but that's where our underlining road structure is not that flash is failing. The sentence I've got in the report is funding for pavement rehabilitations is very tight, and this will need to be further reviewed to ensure that our transport network does not deteriorate further, and that's something for a future long-term plan discussion where we will bring to the table the modelling, the latest data that we've got on the state of our network. One other issue that I want to raise is the vegetation growth across our network, and that's the weeds, I'll call them, especially the warm season summer weeds. We've got a lot of vegetation across our network in the curb and channels and the guttering, and another one for a future discussion is around the number of vegetation sprays we do, vegetation control. On this network we currently spray 3 times a year, which works okay until we have a year like we've had this year, where now we're into April and we've got a warm wet period, and there's lots of additional vegetation. Our city looks untidy in areas, and there will be a future discussion that we'll bring to the table about increasing 3 sprays a year to 4 sprays, and with a relatively modest, I'll call it, increase relative to other costs, we can have some pretty big enhancements. Appreciate I've rushed through that, but happy to take any questions.
Yes, we have a number of questions. Thanks, Glenn. First is Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Glenn. A couple of questions. The first one is, if someone reports a footpath fault through the Snaps and Solve, say, or they phone in, is the budget to repair that?
It depends. We endeavour to get the worst of the faults, and if there's something that's very dangerous and noting that any footpath fault has some level of danger in it. If there's a hole in our footpath or if there's a major risk, we'll turn that around pretty quick. But we currently don't have the funding to be able to fix all faults that are reported.
And is that coming out of the renewal work, or is that a maintenance budget?
It actually comes out of both, councillor.
Okay.
So if we have a fault, sometimes the fault can be in isolation, and that's where a heavy vehicle is driven across the footpath where heavy vehicles don't normally drive, and that does one bit of footpath. That's typically maintenance. If we have a fault where, for whatever reason, if there's been settlement or if there's been an earthquake or if there's been trees and there's a whole street or a substantial part of a street of footpaths, 50, 60 metres, 100 metres, that's a renewal. So where there's a length of footpath that needs to be renewed, typically it's a renewal. Where there's an isolated patch, the patch is maintenance.
Okay, thank you for that. It's helpful. And then my other question is about pavement reseals and rehabilitations. So I've had quite a number of complaints about Pioneer Highway, and I know also it's been raised by other people on council's Facebook page. So what is the plan for Pioneer Highway? Is it a reseal? Is it a rehabilitation? And when is that planned for?
Councillor, you might have noticed some recent comms that went out about some work that that a couple of areas of infrastructure are doing, council in Fitzherbert Ave, which is the three waters and the transport. So transport is doing some surface repairs, some surfacing work in Fitzherbert Ave. After that, there's some isolated work in Botanical Road, and then after that, there's some work in Pioneer Highway. When I say work, I want to say something like the 28-29 year or 29-30, there's a budgeted amount for a full rehabilitation or a rebuild of the worst areas in Pioneer Highway. Because of the major failures that you reference, it's sinking, it's rough, it doesn't have a nice ride to it. We're doing some holding repairs, and those holding repairs will either be later this financial year or early next financial year. And that's about the best I can give you now as far as the timeline goes. So that's the approach. And the repairs of Pioneer Highway is to mill off or remove the worst areas and relay a surface, which will get us another 4 or 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. Just one left on my list then, which is in paragraph 3.10, Glenn, where there's a reference around a cracked head wall in one of the culvert structures. Can you give us some insight in terms of how that, how we came to be aware of that issue?
We came to be aware of it, councillors, through our ongoing bridge inspections, where we inspect our bridges and look for any maintenance items that need to be done, but also, maybe even more importantly, any cracks, any failures, any issues, so that we can repair those before there is a failure.
Thank you. Is the frequency of our and comprehensiveness of our checking now such that we don't think we're going to get into another situation where we have a major blowout because we missed something earlier on? I'm thinking Amberley Ave as the example, obviously.
Certainly the chances of having another Amberley Ave failure are much reduced. Even with the best inspections, sometimes things do happen out of sync that you don't quite expect, but certainly the chances of having another Amberley Ave type situation are greatly reduced.
Thanks. So would you characterize the inspection regime that we have now as the best, or kind of adequate, or still needs work?
In accordance of what we should be doing.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Glenn. Excuse me. The footpath ops and maintenance, I'm just wondering, this might not be something you can answer today, but can we get something a bit more quantitative in terms of how big is the program, how many streets compared to last year, for example, or what does the budget that we've got get us in real terms, so we can get a sense of what the scale and impact of the reduction of budget is?
Certainly, councillor, and I'll make that a topic of the next report we bring back. Possibly in the past we've focused on things like the street lights or the sweeping. I'll undertake the work for the next report that you discuss.
Thank you. That would be helpful. And just in regards to the road sweeping and sump clearing, we've talked before, and has there been a manual component where the parked cars have impeded the street sweepers or the access to gutters? Have we been ramping up the manual component to get around that, or is that just a rescheduling until such time as the cars aren't there?
Both. So we've been ramping up, but also rescheduling and doing our best, but both is the answer.
Great. Thank you. At 3.5, you just had a note about the road markings and 80% of the city being remarked, and I just wanted to clarify whether that was 80% of the city's streets or 80% of the scheduled work.
80% of the scheduled work is probably more an accurate reflection when I think that our length of network, the rural roads have been completed, but the rural roads only have a very small amount of marking, so 80% of our network.
Great, thank you. One last one, which was about pavement seals and the loose chip removal, but just in terms of that result on vehicle traffic to do the embedding and whether or not that overall achieves an uneven embedding process compared to what a roller might do. Did you have a view on that?
Yeah, it's a tough question because they're both quite different, things, and a roller is typically used immediately or not far behind a sealing operation, and that achieves some bedding into the chip. The trafficking has a different purpose, in that beds in the chip after the rolling and also make sure there's coverage around, so they do quite different things. It's certainly something that education of our road users and our public, we can probably do better on that. Loose chip is required to some extent. We don't want big swales or big mountains of loose chip where it's a danger, but certainly we don't want to remove all chip too early before it's had a chance to bed in.
Right, yeah, because it's finding the gaps and sort of distributing across that.
Yeah, and certainly people much more smarter than me will have a long answer to that, but that is the answer.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's all from me. Thanks, Madam
Thanks,
Chair.
Councillor. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a very quick question there, Glenn, just in terms of, we got ourselves into a little bit of trouble last year with the street sweeping, the contract, in terms of the amount of money that we had in the budget. You've actually mentioned in the report, and you touched on it earlier there, just about the budget is under a little bit of pressure at the moment because of the early leaf fall. So is that going to be able to be managed within the existing budget, or are we likely to have to rethink that?
We'll manage within the existing levels of service. If we have budget pressures, we'll come back to the table and have a talk about that. But I'm confident we'll manage within the existing budget. If the question is if we need a little bit more money to get a massive increase in service, if there's a storm, if there's a really cold windy period where there's lots of leaf drop, we will do what's required to make sure there's no issues.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Finally, Councillor Arnott. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Glenn. I'd also like to talk about leaves. I tend to get a lot of phone calls about leaves for some reason. I'd just like to check that the contractor that we're using has the proper tools that they need to be able to do the good job. I saw 4...
Question?
Yeah, well, I basically just asked it that they've got what they need. I saw 4 gentlemen this morning picking up leaves first time, and one was on a rake, one was on a shovel, and 2 were holding the wool pack that the leaves were going into. Past contractor had a truck with a big long hose that sucked up the leaves. So I'd just like to check that the contractor has what they need to be able to do a good job for the city.
I believe our contractors have the tools they need to do the job. sometimes the heavy leaf fall that's underneath culvert plates is best undertaken by people in the operation you describe. Other times a different manual method, or sorry, non-manual method is the appropriate method. So it is in a way horses for courses, but certainly our contractor has the equipment that's fit for purpose.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, councillor. Okay, we'll now look to move the recommendation that we received the memorandum. Thank you very much, Glenn. Titled Road Maintenance Contract 6 Monthly Update presented to this committee for the 9th of April and seconded by Councillor Wood. Would anyone like to comment? You're holding us up from lunch. Councillor Johnson, holding us up for lunch.
Sorry, I'll make it a quick comment. I did just want to say that I'm really pleased with the result that the team have got on street lights. You know, not so long ago, we had a really concerning report about the number of lights that were out across the city. And I think it's worth noting that the substantial work has gone into this, and that we now have come out the other side of that crisis. And since I'm always the first one to complain when the street lighting isn't adequate, I thought it'd be only reasonable of me to commend the team on the street lighting result at the moment and say that that's really good to see, both literally and figuratively. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. No other comments, let's go to vote. We are going to come back. We've got the group is arriving at 1, but let's all get back here by 1:05. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice lunch break. I don't know if it's, I have voted, yeah. Has everybody else voted? Yeah, it's passed 15 votes for, thank you. I don't know who didn't vote. I don't know who didn't vote. Four. It's Brent.